Hello, cruel, cruel world. My name is Dr. Sohom. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. You can call me the ominous Sohominous. Now, we know that Diddy is being held at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center after being denied bail and the option for house detention by a Manhattan federal magistrate judge named Robin Taranovsky. So this video is the reasons why he was denied bail. So I'll give you a list of all the common factors and then I'll give you my opinion on each one on how it's relevant to Diddy's case. So this is part 4 of a series. I work as an expert witness. I give evidence in court, so I know the inner mechanisms of all of this ish. Part 1 of this series was about Diddy's personality traits and what we can infer from his behaviour and an overline of his offences. Part 2 was about whether he can have a diagnosis of a mental illness, whether it can be used as a psychiatric defence, and the kind of stuff that I might say if I was giving evidence in this kind of trial, and also how Diddy would be treated in prison. And part 3 is all about Diddy being placed on suicide watch. What does it actually mean? I outlined what I thought his actual risks of suicide was, and I also told you as a bonus what the worst deliberate self-harm that I've ever seen in prison was. This video, part 4, is about the decision to grant bail. Now, obviously, this is made on a case-by-case basis and depends on a variety of factors. I know what you're thinking. Enough talking, ominous, hominous, put your money where your nose is. How is this relevant to Diddy? I'll answer that question. Let's cue the music. Okay, so in terms of the factors, probably the most common and the most obvious reason why people are denied bail is the seriousness of the original allegations. So if they're considered particularly heinous or dangerous, and let's face it, in Diddy's situation, he definitely ticks this box, doesn't he? So they're very serious accusations against a number of potential victims. So that one, pretty obvious, pretty easy. Number 2, the risk of reoffending. I think it's a bit more complicated. So if the judge believes that the defendant poses a risk of committing another crime whilst he's on bail, then they'll deny the bail simply to protect the public. So a judge might decide that the defendant poses a significant risk to the general community, therefore he has to be locked up immediately because he's so dangerous. How's this relevant to Diddy? Okay, I'm going to say something that's a bit controversial. I don't think that Diddy is actually of a significant risk right now. Reason being is because he's so high profile, he's so famous compared to like the average offender, the average Joe. So if what he is accused of is correct, if he did those things, then clearly I'm not saying for a second, I'm not denying that he's not capable of heinous, horrific, horrendous horrors, clearly lacks empathy, clearly impulsive, clearly very dangerous. But, and this is my point, he's also quite cunning and manipulative, so I don't think he'd be stupid enough to reoffend right now. And simply because he's so high profile, he'd never get away with it. Even the biggest fans of his freak-offs, even these other celebrities, would turn down an invite right now, wouldn't they? Because there's so much attention, so much of a spotlight on Diddy. So all those people that have been potentially implicated, Ashton Kutcher, Paris Hilton, Howard Stern, Russell Simmons, Diddy calls them up, suddenly they're all very, very busy. Apart from Russell Brand, oddly, he's available and he's raring to go. So I think you could even argue that Diddy is the least risky right now than he's ever been in the last few decades, compared with another offender who's like a regular violent offender who could, literally attack anybody, rob anybody if he was left on the streets. So that is a reason to deny somebody bail, but I don't think, in my personal opinion, this counts for Diddy right now. The other big deciding factor on whether somebody needs to be remanded as opposed to given bail is a flight risk. So if the judge believes that the defendant may attempt to flee the jurisdiction, they might simply deny bail just to make sure that person's physically available for trial. What do I think about Puffy, about Diddy? I don't know. I think it could be argued either way. I think it's unlikely that he would try and leg it from the States because it would be so damaging to his case. But you could also argue that if he knew the evidence was there and he knew he's going down for a long period of time, and if he's certain that he's going to be in prison for a long period of time, unlike the average offender, he's definitely got the resources, doesn't he? He's got money. He could get a private jet. He could fly somewhere where he knew he won't be extradited. Obviously, this means that he would have to stay away from the United States probably for the rest of his life. But if he's balancing it up, it might be better to stay in exile or hidden in some far-off tropical country, sipping pina coladas, than be in prison for the rest of his life. So I think you could argue that that is a good reason to keep him in prison. Moving on, another really big factor is the strength of the evidence in the case. So if the evidence against the defendant is strong and it suggests that they are going to be convicted, then a judge might deny bail a bit like the flight risk, because they want to make sure that they're there. So in my experience, this is only for people who are very chaotic in their lifestyle, who might not turn up to their own trial, or, as I said before, who's at flight risk. But I think the evidence against Diddy is actually quite weak, especially when you considered the evidence that was collected by authorities when what they recovered from those raids. And I'll explain why. Before I do that, I want to introduce you to this channel, A Schmike for Small Minds. I'm a forensic psychiatrist, so I assess mentally ill offenders, give evidence in court. So my videos are usually about either mental illness or criminality, or the crossover betwixt the two. In terms of analysing individual celebrities who've been naughty boys, I do have a few of those. So I've done videos on R. Kelly, on Russell Brand, on Tim Westwood, who actually tried to cancel that video off YouTube. I more recently have been doing videos about myths, so 5 myths about cults, 5 myths about gaslighting, 5 myths about kidnapping. Go chickadee check it out. I implore you to subscribe to my channel, because not only does it help me out immeasurably, but if you subscribe, then you will never step in dog do ever again. You will never mess up your brand new shiny crepes, guaranteed, or your money back. Okay, going back to the video, I think the evidence against Diddy is weak in terms of what the authorities recovered in his raids, because, let's face it, they got narcotics, but maybe Diddy's washing up powder dealer tried to cut some of his personal with cocaine, so it's not his fault. Okay, they got 3 AR-15 rifles with defaced serial numbers, but everybody knows that Diddy likes duck hunting. And they've got more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant, but come on, everybody knows that Diddy has very, very ashy legs. Moving on, another factor would be the defendant's criminal history. So if you've got somebody who's got a history of lots of prior convictions, especially for similar crimes, that increases the likelihood that they will be denied bail, that they will be detained instead, because it's more likely that they'll carry on committing those crimes. So a good example might be, say, if you've got somebody who's been charged with domestic violence, and you have to put them on remand, because if you bailed them, then they would go back to the home where the victim lives, like their wife, for example. You can't have that risk. In terms of Diddy's criminal history, I mean, it's relatively mild, I would say. There was obviously that nightclub shooting with Jennifer Lopez, but he was actually found not guilty. So if you look at it just from his criminal history, it's actually quite mild. Another one is failure to abide by previous bail conditions. So if a defendant has a history of violating bail in the past, not turning up to the trials for whatever reason, then the judge might deny bail for that reason, so that they don't basically leg it. So an obvious example of that would be a career criminal who just doesn't have respect for the law, doesn't care whether he's trialed or not, doesn't care if he gets arrested down the line because there's a warrant out for his arrest. So that'd be the most obvious thing. But I've actually seen other cases. So I've seen people that have such a chaotic lifestyle. So they might be drug addicts, they might be homeless, they might have a learning disability, they might have a psychiatric illness. So what I'm saying is these people, they are at high risk of not attending their court case, not intentionally necessarily, but because they literally don't know, they don't care when their court case is, because they've got such a chaotic life. Those are the kind of people that will sometimes get locked up, even if they're relatively low risk. So I've seen people that have got drug offences or maybe shoplifting or something. So on paper, they're not that risky, but they're denied bail by the judge simply because if they're allowed to be released, they might just go off. They might go off on a drug binge, or they're homeless and they might disappear for weeks on end. Okay, my final point. Come on, almost there. You can do it. Get you back into it. Is a little bit of an unusual one, slightly controversial, and it's something that you won't get in newspaper articles or criminology textbooks. It's purely from my clinical experience, and that's this: politics. So there can be political reasons why somebody like Diddy might be denied bail, might be remanded. I think because what Diddy did, what he's accused of doing, I should say, he has denied it, is so just heinous, and it's got so much attention and it's damaged potentially so many lives, that he's so high profile that the judge needs to be seen to take a harsh stance. So let me put it another way. It could be that there was 2 people, one who's like a high profile producer, celebrity like Diddy, and one who's not, and they've done exactly the same kind of crimes, and the judge might think, well, actually, they're not that risky right now, but because Diddy's got so much attention, they need to look like they're being harsh. They need to look like they're making an example out of him. So that could be one of the factors that the judge has considered. Okay, I've rambled on long enough. I've got a question for you, my Psych for Sore guys and gals, don't cancel me. If you were the judge, would you deny bail to Diddy, or would you consider house arrest? Would that be a reasonable alternative? And if you insisted on remanding Coco Puff, what would be the reason? What of those specific legal criteria would you use? Because Like all things in life, you can't just do it on a hunch. You can't just say, I want him in prison. You have to legally fulfill one of those criteria. So which one of those do you think Diddy fits in most comfortably? Is there more than one category? Let me know your thoughts in the Schmomment section below. Okay, that's enough from me. Have a blessed day, and do not forget, I love you.